Have you ever had one of those dreams about the end of the world? A dream so vivid that you didn't know it was a dream, and even after waking up, you're confused as to how you could spend multiple days worth of time exploring the mindscape before coming back to reality? For as many dreamers that exist, there are dreams to be dreamt. Whether that end of the world scenario is alien, nuclear, or zombie filled, they so often center around the fall of the old world as we know it and the terrifying start to a new one, and can oftentimes keep you up at night after it ends. Well, I had one of those, and it coincides with the making of today's video. So sit back and listen closely to a tale about the end of the world, and 3 unsuspecting children who rise to meet it. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Nagato's birth was one believed to bring peace to the world. As the next sage of 6 paths, all believed him to be able to bring the world into peace. But unbeknownst to the rest of the world, at that very moment, another story was unfolding. Another prophecy. Another sage of 6 paths. The location was the moon, in a manor just a bit away from the rest of civilization. As the echoes of distant explosions, battle cries, and the ugly sounds of war could be heard, the sound of a child's birth. A woman's travail and baby's cries rung out, the father wringing his hands as he walked back and forth, sweat with fear. Yes, perhaps the physicians were the best of all within this rock that held the statue from their ancient past, the progenitor of their people, but fear remained. What if the child is sick? What if the mother doesn't stop bleeding? The natural fears of such an event. This man was not the first to think these thoughts, and he was far from the last. So long as life continued to be born into this world, these thoughts would naturally follow. But what had shaken the manor to its core was not the event of stillbirth, nor the tragedy of a mother's lost life. No, the wonder was when the child opened its eyes. Crystal blue, the irises bearing what appeared to be a flowing, undulating, spinning lotus. These eyes bore the same shape as the Tenseigan vessel that Hamada had given to his people after his death. Hamada, being one of 2 sages of 6 paths at the time, possessed special eyes, ones he seldom showed any. Awakened after the defeat of his mother, Hamada used them to open a portal to the moon where he and his kind stood custodian of this world and the one of Hagoromo. But as the tides of time washed and eroded away the sands of his body, Hamada's time eventually came. And so he allowed upon his death for his Tenseigan to be taken and stored inside of a vessel of his own making that bore the name of his dojutsu. With each passing generation, the dead offered up their Byakugan to this vessel, and with each new pair of eyes, the Tenseigan grew stronger and stronger. Wars began to be waged over the meaning of Hamada's will, and so many had been lost. A tragedy felt on both sides. But looking upon the eyes of the child, the screams and cries of battle hushed. Hamada himself, seeing the troubles of his people, had seemingly returned once again to them in an effort to clarify his will. What was the will of this child? As the judge of his own clan, what would he decide? What did the world deserve? The various world wars fought on its surface, the misuse of chakra, what would the judgment be? As the child grew, knowledge was forced into his head. Wisdom was seated at an early stage, and the moment he could make a decision, he would. What is the verdict, Sage of 6 Paths? The people of the Lunar Kingdom cried to their new master. The boy, who after birth had been given the name Toneri due to him being the new head of the House of the Otsutsuki, would be left to judge and decide what the will of Hamada was concerning the earth. Toneri, looking out to the little blue orb as it hovered in the sky above them, sat for a time in quiet contemplation. His crystal eyes awakening from meditation, he spoke. The judgment is death. The week had been mostly quiet for Karin and Naruto. They observed Nagato from a distance. Neither of them quite had the guts to speak to him yet. Uzumaki, he looks so much like us. Well, so much like you, Naruto said as his gaze jumped between Karin and Nagato. The boy, amazingly, was able to maintain his peace throughout the various school days. He was, of course, very popular, but whether by the threat of the school or perhaps simply because his novelty wore off very quickly, he was attending school like a normal kid now. His school clothes had changed. He was now wearing the same type of open-toed shoes as the rest of them, as well as a black jumper where both the shirt and shorts were connected without seam, as if they were a single piece. It was nearly a week since he had joined class. Naruto and Karin seemed to be the only children left to think about him. "You'd think we should introduce ourselves?" Naruto asked. Karin waved it off. "Just because he's a member of the same clan as us doesn't exactly make him a true blood relative. He's from the village hidden in the rain. That's a totally different village. And besides, there's not many Uzumaki left. Whether he's a direct blood relative or not, I'm just glad that we have another family connection at all." Karin stood there. She thought about it and tried to read the boy's chakra, but it was fundamentally different from every other chakra she had ever felt. She couldn't explain it. There was a serenity about the boy, like he was born from nature itself. As they spoke, he was just sitting under a tree, various animals coming to him. There was a type of natural sense to his chakra. Karin hadn't experienced it before, but she wondered if it could be a sage power. Sage what? Naruto asked. Sage power, Naruto. Just like they described about Hashirama Senju. How he could use the energy of nature to awaken his sage mode, which gifted him with the strength of nature. Naruto gasped. "Oh, I forgot that's what it was called," he said. He seemed slightly embarrassed that he forgot such an important part of Hashirama's history. Disregarding this, he returned to the topic at hand. Nagato. Guess there's only one way to find out if he's really using sage power. Hey, Naga! Karin would quickly cover his mouth to stop him. Thankfully, Nagato didn't seem to hear him. Karin held Naruto's mouth shut until he started licking the palm of her hand. Ew! She pulled her hand back and shook it out. What's wrong with you? Naruto looked at her. Listen, we're not gonna learn anything by sitting here. I don't think he seems so special. Sure, he had weird eyes, but Sasuke has weird eyes too, and I don't see the world fawning over him. Let's just go over and check it out. What's the worst thing that could happen? Karin was wiping her hand off on her shorts and side-eyeing Naruto in a way that her expression told him that she was skeptical but curious. Naruto took that as an okay and walked on over. Hello, he said with the widest grin. Nagato looked over and saw the biggest set of teeth he had ever looked at. It tickled him pink. He let out a giggle. Hello. Naruto then asked if he could sit down too. Nagato smiled. By all means, please sit. Naruto sat down. So, me and my sister were talking, and he pointed back at her. Nagato looked and smiled at her. Karin freaked out and hid behind a tree. Don't mind her, I think she's intimidated by your weird eyes. Nagato's expression showed a bit of shock and comedy. Never heard my Rinnegan described like that before, but please, continue. Naruto began to speak. Is it true that you're a member of the Uzumaki clan? Nagato nodded. Yes, I'm a member on my mother's side. Naruto smiled. That's awesome. Me and Karin are too. Nagato looked over. Wait, you two are Uzumaki? Naruto nodded. Yep, our mother moved here from Uzoshiogakure when she was really little. She was brought to be the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, but sadly she passed away when giving birth to us, and the Nine Tails had to be sealed into both me and Karin. Nagato sat there for a moment. Wait, did you say that your mother was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails? Naruto nodded. Nagato thought back about it. I seem to have heard that somewhere before. I recall someone telling me something about that, but I can't remember what. Nagato was silent for a moment as he racked his brain, searching for the answers he was looking for. He looked to Naruto with a smile. Well, either way, it's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto. Please send your sister my regards. Tell her I don't bite and would like to meet her too next time. Naruto smiled. Will do. The school day came to an end. Nagato headed home with his guardians, Yahiko and Konin. Once they got home, Nagato washed up and waited by the table for supper to be brought in. He and Yahiko were sitting there while Konin was putting the finishing touches on it. Yahiko was currently reading through the newspaper for any possible news regarding the current state of the world, as well as their home village, Ame. Looks like another day of nothing at all, Yahiko said. Well, no news is good news, Konin said from the other room. Nagato sat there thinking deeply. Yahiko peeked over the top of the paper for a moment. Something up, Nagato? You haven't spoken much since we came home. Is something the matter? Nagato looked up. Huh? Oh, no. I'm just racking my brain. I'm trying to remember something someone told me about the Nine Tails Jinchuriki, but I can't remember. Yahiko put the paper down. Oh, if that's all, why not ask me? You know? Nagato asked. Yahiko nodded. Yeah, I was informed about all the known information about you when we were announced as your guardians. Could you tell me about it then? Nagato asked. Where do I begin? Yahiko asked as he thought about it. The Nine Tails Jinchuriki was chosen from the Uzumaki clan as part of some deal that would add new rules to the way wars are fought, he said. After the end of the Second Shinobi World War, the village hidden by whirling tides came up with a plan to keep children out of war and outlaw certain ninjutsu of certain classes that could be considered cruel and inhumane. They also wanted to add certain protection laws for non-combatants and surrendering shinobi, but in the end, that resulted in the destruction of Uzoshiogakure and the eventual demise of the Uzumaki clan. This led to the Third Shinobi World War. The Nine Tails Jinchuriki was an exchange between Konoha and Uzoshio to seal the pact Konoha had with the village. In exchange for getting the quote-unquote perfect Jinchuriki, they'd be the first to sign these accords, and the rest of the world would soon have to follow suit. Or that was the plan. I already told you how that ended. Yes, but who was this Jinchuriki? Nagato asked. Yahiko looked at him curiously. Why do you ask? Because I met her children today. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, named Naruto and Karin. I was trying to figure out if they were related to me somehow. Yahiko began racking his brain. I can't remember that. I know that there was something to do with it in your file, but I can't remember. Hey, Konin! She popped her head around the corner. What is it? Do you happen to know anything about the connection Nagato has with Konoha's Nine-Tails Jinchuriki? Of course, Conan said. She was your aunt. Wait, what? Nagato exclaimed. Conan then continued. She was your aunt. She and your mother grew up together until she had to be taken away to become the perfect Jinchuriki for Konoha. Not long after, your mother had to flee Uzoshiogakure, where she settled in Ame and married a physician. You were born not long after. Nagato stood up. Those kids I met today, they were my cousins. Conan entered the room. You met the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki's children today? Nagato nodded. Yes, they were wondering if I was somehow connected to them through the clan. Conan thought about it for a moment. Well, I suppose it isn't unlikely. After all, this was the village where she settled. I heard she had died though. She did. She died in childbirth, Nagato said. I have family here. I need to go tell them. Conan laughed and held out her hand. Slow down, Nogs. You still have one more day of school this week. You can tell them tomorrow. For now, eat some dinner and get some rest. Nagato tried to do that. The issue was he couldn't bring himself to sleep until very late due to his own excitement. Nagato the next morning would begin to make his way to the school. Getting there, he would make a beeline straight for Naruto and Karin. They'd be sitting at their desks. What's up, Nagato? Naruto asked. Nagato could barely contain his giggles. Guess what? What? Naruto asked, curious as to what Nagato could be so excited about. I went home last night and I asked about your mother. I wanted to know more about her. As it turns out, your mom and my mom were sisters. Karin's eyes went so wide that they looked like they might just fall out of her head. Naruto was still processing it. Wait, does that mean? Nagato began running in place. He was so excited. It means we're cousins. Naruto got up out of the seat as fast as he could, hugged Nagato, and the two began jumping in excitement. Nagato reached out his hand for Karin. Karin began to cry, making Naruto and Nagato's expression change to a more serious tone. What's wrong, Karin? Nagato asked. She stood and hugged him, planting her face into his shoulder. I am so happy. We were so alone. Nagato's heart immediately shattered. His excitement turned to near tears themselves as he realized how starved for a family bond she was. You'll never be alone again. I won't let you, he said as his hug intensified. Naruto walked over and hugged them too. By this time, they were already the center of attention in class. Everyone was looking now. That was until Iriko walked in and demanded that they all sit down and turn their attention toward the lessons he had planned for them. Nagato decided to sit with Naruto and Karin today. They planted in between them so they could both have the chance to sit next to their newly discovered cousin. As the day came to an end, Nagato had a little free time, so he decided to stick with Naruto and Karin for a while. He would give Conan and Yahiko a call to tell them where he was and what he'd be doing, and they gave him the stamp of approval with the appeal for him to be safe, which he told them he would do. As they walked to Naruto and Karin's apartment, Nagato spoke. So, what's it like being the village's perfect Jinchuriki? Not as great as you would think, Karin said. Nagato was a bit confused, but as he walked with them, he couldn't help but notice that Naruto and Karin were both getting side-eyed. Karin seemed most caught by this, as while walking, she pulled her arms into a fold and scrunched her neck down as if she were battling bitter cold. She could read the negative emotions of these people, and she had to face it every day. Naruto put his arm around her shoulders as her support. He obviously didn't feel it or didn't let it bother him, but it bothered Nagato. It bothered him a lot. Why was the village treating them this way? As they made it to their apartment, he walked in with them and looked around. It was a small apartment with only one bedroom, one bath, and a small kitchen toward the entrance. Nagato walked a little deeper into their living room and looked around. It was slightly messy, but looked as if someone were at least trying to keep it tidy. This is a nice apartment, he said, being kind. He looked back. I would offer your guardians my compliments, but it seems they must be out to the market. What guardians? Naruto asked. Nagato's eyes widened. Wait, you don't have parental guardians? Naruto shook his head. Nope, it's just me and her, he said, pointing toward Karin. Nagato began to slightly grit his teeth, though his expression remained neutral. He tried to push it from his mind. Well, who cooks the food? Karin raised her hand. What are you planning to eat today? Nagato asked. I think we still have some ramen left in the cabinet. I might have eaten that last night, Naruto said with a chuckle. Naruto, that was our supper. Karin walked over to the cabin and opened it up. There were no more cups of ramen, only a couple of cans of sardines. Karin sighed. Guess sardines will be our supper tonight. Why don't you just buy more ramen? Or better yet, go out to a nice restaurant, Nagato asked. We don't have the money to. Every month, Hiruzen sends us our allowance. It's supposed to be enough to carry us through the month, but as of late, with all the growth of Naruto's appetite, it's becoming harder and harder to stretch it. After all, a growing boy's gotta eat. Nagato picked up the phone. He began dialing a number. The phone rang for a moment until someone picked up on the other end. Hi, Yahiko. I have a question. Can I bring my cousins home tonight for a sleepover? Can you make enough to feed them, too? He waited a moment as the voice on the other end mumbled a bit. The voice then gave an approval. Good, I'll be home soon. He then looked to Naruto and Karin. Pack up a few things you might need tonight. We're gonna party at my house. Naruto and Karin looked to each other. Karin then spoke. We wouldn't want to put you and your guardians out or anything. Nagato laughed. Don't worry about that. We're all good. Karin looked at Naruto once more, who mouthed the words, "Can we please?" to her. She looked to Nagato, who had taken a page from Naruto's book and was now all teeth. She relented. Only if it's not any trouble for you or your guardians. Nagato pulled the chain, pumping his fist in excitement. Yes, I have so many things cooking in my brain. We're gonna have so much fun. Nagato and the Uzumaki twins began making their way back to Nagato's house. Entering, Naruto and Karin couldn't help but look at the inside with awe. No way! You're staying at the Senju house? Naruto shouted out in excitement. Karin looked over. The what? Nagato touched his nose. You know your stuff, Naruto. This is indeed the home of the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. Karin was confused, but Naruto explained it to her. I'm a bit of a Hashirama Senju buff. He's my favorite Hokage. His abilities and powers. Oh, I particularly loved learning about his wood release. Did you know that he's the only known user to naturally achieve it? Nobody knows where it came from or why it disappeared, only that he... Naruto began to ramble on, causing Karin and Nagato to slightly zone out. As Naruto came to the end of his long spiel, Nagato smiled. That's so cool, Naruto. You'll have to tell me more about it later. I'm gonna go see if dinner's ready, he said. Nagato then began to rush off toward the kitchen. Karin stood there patiently. Naruto began walking around the foyer. After a few moments passed, Yahiko entered the room with Nagato. He stepped forward and extended his hand out to the two. It's an honor to have you in the household with us. The honor's all ours, Mr. Yahiko. Just Yahiko. You can drop the Mr. Makes me feel old. Yahiko led them deeper into the home where they found the dining room. They sat there by the table and waited. So what's it like living here in Konoha? Yahiko asked. Boring, Karin said. Very boring, Naruto tagged on. We would much rather hear about what Ame is like, Karin said. Is it true that it rains every day? Naruto asked. Yahiko gave off a laugh. Not exactly. It doesn't rain all day, every day there, it just on most occasions. It's more often rainy than sunny, which is how it got its name, but it does still have some clear days. They're more far and few between. For a while there, they talked about their different villages and about past experiences and histories before eventually the conversation evolved into Fuso and Kushina's history. This lasted until supper was ready. The plates would be brought to them. After supper, Nagato wanted to spend some time playing games. He had so many fun ideas about what they could do. Naruto and Karin obliged and began playing along. Some were simple, some were complicated, but all were fun. As the night wore on, it became increasingly obvious that sleep would soon overtake them, and so they each took their turns cleaning up before bed. Yahiko and Konan would roll out a couple extra futons for Naruto and Karin to sleep on. As they all said goodnight, Nagato, Naruto, and Karin all tried their best to stay up, laughing and talking and playing about until the siren song of sleep grew too much for them to handle. That night was one of the best nights Naruto and Karin had ever had. It seemed that nothing could spoil it. The day began, and they were just as happy as they were the night before. Then they turned on the TV. It showed a live video of the moon as the news anchor spoke. The moon was an unnaturally large size, and debris seemed to be circling it like a fine cloud of dust. Scientists have still yet to determine the cause of this, but one thing is certain. The world will never be the same. It then changed to a scientist speaking as he had a blackboard with various formulas and diagrams drawn on it, which he was using to help him explain. The moon is growing closer at an alarming rate. Many are asking if the moon will crash down on us, and the answer is a resounding no. We are not at risk of a total collision with the moon, per se, but what we're seeing at current is the sudden altering of tides. Tides are becoming more and more extreme, which isn't much of an issue for us here in Konoha, but in coastal areas, particularly in places like the village hidden in the mist, as well as the land of waves, evacuations are already underway, as the tides will soon reach the point of flooding these areas. Besides that, our days and nights are going to be rapidly decreasing in length of time. We currently have a 24-hour day period, but by the end of this scenario, we could be looking at days as short as 6 to 12 hours long. Now, once the moon reaches a certain distance from us, it will likely begin to break apart under the stress of our gravity. That distance currently sits at roughly about 11,500 miles from Earth. Once it passes by that barrier, the moon will begin to disintegrate into smaller pieces until all that is left is a sea of meteorites. That likely sounds far better to you than your previous conceptions, but the difference is like choosing between taking a cannonball to the chest and taking a shotgun blast point blank. Our planet won't be destroyed by any means, but life on it, well, that could very well end, at least as we know it. Depending on when the moon begins to break apart, we could see major powers such as the Land of Fire being reduced to a molten landscape. And if the fragments of the moon do not disintegrate into very small chunks, we could see extinction-level meteorites landing in different locations around the world. That's the current worst-case scenario. But if we're blessed enough to only receive small meteorites, we might be able to survive the initial impacts. The casualties would be great, but mankind would survive. It then switched back to the anchor. What would the world look like after that? The scientist then flipped the chalkboard to show something else. After this, should we survive, we would see a complete shift in the ecosystem, particularly in regards to tide and nocturnal animals. The tides would only be at about 1/3 what they normally would be, and animals that hunt at night, such as owls, would have a hard time adapting to the total lack of light. This means entire species of predatory animals will slowly begin to die off, as their prey, such as rodents, will begin to multiply out of control, bringing with them disease. The spin and tilt of the Earth would also shift variably, resulting in summers that last for decades, or sudden onslaughts of winter that could occur over the course of a couple weeks before returning to an intense summer. The northern and southern poles of our planets could see an increase in daylight where normally they get little, and due to that, the ice caps would begin to melt. Besides that, weather such as typhoons and hurricanes will spawn more often and be far more deadly. This will no doubt lead to the end of life on Earth. What has caused the moon to do this? The anchor asked. The scientist began to take off his glasses. There is no known cause. We have no explanation. The moon was, for a time, slowly drifting away from us, but now it's drawing closer, and we have no explanation as to why. The anchor spoke again. Let me then ask the question on everyone's mind. Is there hope that humanity will still exist in the coming days? The scientist nodded. Of course, there's always hope that we might continue to exist. The cards are stacking against us, it seems, but there is the chance that we could adapt to it. It will be a trial unlike any we've ever faced, and there's a very good chance that many of us will not survive without proper care. If you live near water, it's suggested that you evacuate. Be sure to have as much food and water as you can. National emergency stores are opened, and every citizen of the Land of Fire is guaranteed to get enough to keep them going for at least a year. The only thing we can do now is pray. Naruto, Karin, and Nagato watched with widened eyes. They could hardly believe what was going on. Is it the end of the world? Naruto asked. Yahiko remained silent as the news switched to a live stream of the moon. As they switched channels, almost every news channel showed it, and every non-news channel redirected to one of the more major news ones. Emergency alerts began to play all throughout the day, informing citizens to head to the nearest shelters not to be struck by the falling debris and to limit the damage done to society as a whole. An air of dread fell over the planet as the night skies were filled with the reminder that judgment was well on its way. School was cancelled, and the entire Hidden Leaf village began heading for the route base under the nearest mountain. As Nagato, Naruto, and Karin continued to watch the broadcasts, suddenly there was a new broadcast played. Whether it had been received by the stations and played on all channels and frequencies, or if perhaps the radio and television stations had been hijacked, was unknown, but an image of a boy likely no older than 12 was shown. He had deeply pale skin and was wearing a lightly colored kimono. He began to address the world. People of Earth, my name is Toneri of the Otsutsuki clan, and I am the Sage of Six Paths. My people currently reside upon the celestial body you call the moon. For 1,000 years, we've watched your society grow, stagnate, and regress, and have determined that you do not deserve the chakra and world that you've been given. We are here to cleanse this world of your presence and start anew in accordance with a revered ancestor, Hamada Otsutsuki. You are to reap what you sow, and what you have planted is death. The harvest is come, and the reapers are ripe to pull in the harvest. Take solace in knowing that there is nothing you can do. Pray for peace and forgiveness now, for I will send you to he who formed you. The video then ended. After this, a single broadcast for the news was played across all stations as they began to pick apart what this could mean. They often replayed the speech and rehashed its meaning. Yahiko and Konan looked at each other in confusion. Wait, Nagato, I thought you were the Sage of Six Paths, Karin said. I did too, Yahiko said. I did too. Yahiko then began to explain. No, history tells us that there were two sages, Hagoromo and Hamada. Hagoromo is the Sage of Six Paths that we know, but his brother possessed similar powers. For some reason though, he decided to live on the moon, leaving the rest of the world behind. A few of his descendants remained, and they're what formed the Hyuga clan, but I don't understand. Hamada never would have wanted this. What could cause this? Nagato stood. I don't know, but I need to stop it. Konan walked over and put her hands on his shoulders. No, Nagato, you're too young. Even if you're the next Sage of Six Paths, you're not ready. Nagato shook his head. No, this is what I was born to do. I'm supposed to make this world a better place, and I can't do it if there's no world left to save. Even if we did let you do this though, there's no way for you to get to the moon, Nagato, Yahiko said. I think it's best if we wait it out. If humanity survives, they'll need a leader, and that leader will be you. Nagato shook his head. No, that boy on the television says that he's going to destroy the world. If the moon falling is a purposeful action, then there's no doubt that he'll not allow it to end with the survival of the human race. If I do nothing, we all die. This is my only chance. We have to go to the moon. How would you even get there? Yahiko asked. Karin raised her hand. They all looked to her. You said that they left behind a branch of their clan that became the Hyuga. If there is a way to get to the moon, surely they'd know. Nagato looked to Konan and Yahiko. Please, this is what I'm meant to do. Let me at least try. Yahiko and Konan looked at each other and nodded. The group would then pack up their gear and head toward the Hyuga compound. There, Nagato would meet with Hiyashi Hyuga and the Elder, who had yet to evacuate to the shelter. Excuse me, but we would like to talk with you, great elders of the Hyuga clan, Nagato said with kindness. Yahiko and Konan elected to stay quiet and allow Nagato to take the lead. This was what he was trained and born to do. What can we help you with? Hiyashi asked. I would like to know if there's any way to get to the moon. Hiyashi sighed. We may be connected to Hamada like this moon clan, but we don't have any knowledge that might help you. We simply do not know how they got to the moon in the first place. Possibly some space-time jutsu that's been lost to time. Regardless, even if we did, there's no guarantee that you could even make it to this lunar sage of six paths. There has to be something, Karin said. Anything at all. Old legends, children's stories, anything. You Hyuga are meticulous in recording the history of your clan. There's gotta be something. Hiyashi sat there for a moment and then shook his head. I'm sorry. I don't... Hiyashi trailed off. It was then that the elder spoke up. I might have something. He stood and walked to the bookcase. He would then pull a book. He began looking through it. I'm trying to see if I can find it, he said. He looked back. There was an old story that was told to me when I was but a child, back when the first Hokage was still in office. Much of the Hyuga clan's family history predating the Warring States period had been lost, but there was a story that had been passed down orally from generation to generation, something we were told almost every night. I was looking to see if it was written down anywhere, but I can at least give you the gist. The story was about a boy who dreamed to go to the moon. It was said that he was easily overwhelmed by the people of the world and sought peace. So he went to the moon to find a place to be alone, but upon making it there, he found it lonely and he missed the earth. It only now occurs to me the story might have been about Hamura, but anyway, as the legend goes, he found the place where the eye of the moon gazed through the heart of man and entered the cave where he proceeded to fall down to the moon's surface. Fall down? Konan asked. The elder nodded. That's how the story goes. I suspect he meant that there was a hidden gateway to the moon, but how to get there is left up to interpretation. Actually, it might not be, Hiyashi stated. He pulled out a map and laid it down on the table. This is a more modern map, and it has unparalleled accuracy. He began to look it over. There, he pointed at a small lake. It was shaped like a heart. This is near the area where Hagoromo was said to have settled down. If Hamada truly was the inspiration for that story, then this is where he would go. Nagato looked at it. Then that's where we ought to go. Thank you so much, honored elders of the Hyuga. And so they traveled all the way to the location on the map. Once they got there, they were met with an odd stony outcropping. As the moon moved through the skies, it almost seemed to perfectly line up with this outcropping, making it appear as though the moon were the pupil of an eye gazing down at them. At the base of this stone was a cave opening, and inside they found a hole. As they fell, they saw various bubbles that played out moments of their lives. It seemed that at this moment, everyone but Nagato had fallen asleep here. Nagato, however, for some reason was perfectly fine. He would eventually go over to them and attempt to wake them up by means of releasing them from genjutsu. Once this was done, they traveled out and realized that they were on the moon. We must get closer, Konan said. The only way to stop Toneri is by getting to him. He should be within the castle at the center. And so, through sneakery and trickery, they managed to get inside of the castle. Once they were there, they began to seek Toneri out. When they got to the door of the throne room, Nagato held out his hand. You all must remain behind, he said. I alone can face Toneri. No way, Yahiko said. We're not going to allow you to face this alone. Nagato looked back. Guys, I love you too much. We're going to be facing a user of the six paths. These techniques are too much for a regular shinobi to handle. We'll have you though, Konan said. Nagato nodded. True, but the moment I start fighting, reinforcements are going to be pouring in. I can't fight Toneri and all of those shinobi at once. I'm going to need you all to buy me some time. Naruto and Karin nodded. Nagato smiled. I'll see you soon. He then opened the door and stepped in. Nagato began walking toward the throne as Toneri watched. He would summon the guards when he didn't recognize Nagato. Nagato would stand there silently. I commend you on finding your way up here, Earthling, Toneri said. but there's nothing you can do to stop it. Nagato would pull something from his pocket. It was a hair tie. He would run his hands through his hair and take up most of it into his grip before tying it off. He would then open his eyes and look directly into Toneri's. "Those eyes," Toneri said in awe. "Are those?" Nagato nodded. "I am the Earth's Sage of Six Paths. Nagato. I bear the eyes of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, brother of Hamada. I am the latest descendant in his line, and the opposite to you, your distant cousin." Toneri stood from his throne and began making his way down. He circled around Nagato. "Interesting. You have a pale complexion like an Otsutsuki, but your hair is far removed from anything seen on the moon. Something outlandish, even by Earthling standards." "We don't have to fight, Toneri," Nagato said. "We can talk this out. You and I both know that this is not the will of Hagoromo, nor Hamada. They were seekers of peace, not judges." "What do you think I seek now?" Toneri said. "The only way peace on Earth will ever exist is if there are no people left on it to war." "That sounds like a very empty peace," Nagato said. "What are you fighting for, Toneri? The people or the flowers?" Toneri stood there for a moment. "I'm fighting for a world inherited by the truly worthy." Nagato scoffed. "I saw many things on my way to this castle. Among the many things I witnessed were the ruins of many battlefields. Did your clan also war? Did you also misuse chakra like you accuse us of doing?" Toneri had no answer. "By your own judgments, your people deserve to be destroyed. If I were the kind to judge as you are, I would say the moon should be destroyed simply because of the people who live thereon. But I'm not going to judge you or your people because your people deserve to live. And so do ours. Rescind your judgment on my people and I will rescind my own on yours." "And what if I don't?" Toneri asks. "Then you'll give me no choice but to kill you." Toneri grits his teeth a little. "Never did I expect the brothers Otsutsuki to fight. Never did I expect one who claims to be Hamada reincarnated to so quickly turn on the ideals he held." Toneri then walked back toward his throne and turned around, holding his hands out as if to present the situation in full to Nagato. "Then I guess we have reached an impasse." "No," Nagato said. "We reached a breaking point." He raised his hand and utilized the Diva Path to push Nagato into the throne behind him. Toneri smashed through the throne and lay there for a second. He then stood. "You're not the only one with tricks," he said. He then held out his hand and utilized a form of the Diva Path himself. Nagato raised his hands to use his own version of the Diva Path a second time to clash, but it was obvious that Toneri's version was superior. Nagato was thrown back. Hitting the wall, he peeled himself from it before suddenly switching to the Ashura Path to fire missiles. Toneri would suddenly clap his hands together and imbue the power of life into the ground, causing the ground to give birth to golems that rose to defend their master. They took the missiles head on and began to rush at Nagato. Nagato, in fear, would then use the Naraka Path to call up the King of Hell and use its powers to strip the life straight from the golems. "Is that all you have?" Nagato asked. Toneri stood there looking at him. No. He would suddenly cover himself with a Saiyan chakra cloak and rush at Nagato. Uh-oh. Outside, various puppets and guards were rushing Naruto, Karin, Konan, and Yahiko. "We gotta do something or we're gonna get overwhelmed," Yahiko shouted. Naruto looked at Karin, who gave him back the same stare. "Konan, Yahiko," Karin shouted. "I know it's a lot to ask, but can you buy us some time?" Yahiko looked back. "No, we can't," he shouted. Konan released a flurry of paper bombs in the form of butterflies. "But we'll do it anyway," she shouted. Naruto and Karin sat down. They gripped each other's hands and began to meditate. "Our mother was the perfect Jinchuriki," Karin said. "Maybe we have that same potential." They would enter their subconscious after some difficulty and would find Kurama, who would offer to help them only for now, declaring that he could not let the earth and life on it that he depended on to fade away. And so, begrudgingly, he offered them his chakra. Together they would meld their chakras together to form a completed Kurama chakra avatar, which would begin to shatter the castle to pieces. Kurama would reach out and sweep the area clean of those who would do them and Nagato harm. Elsewhere, Nagato would be struck by Toneri's attack and also sent to the surface. Toneri would hover there with his truth-seeking orbs hovering behind him. "For one who possesses the supposedly most exalted dojutsu of them all, you're painfully lacking with it." Nagato rose to his feet. "Toneri, you have to stop this. This isn't what Hamura would want." "And how do you know what Hamura would want?" "You can't. Only I can, and I've already made my final judgment." Toneri flew down and struck Nagato again, sending him flying a good ways away. At about that moment, Naruto and Karin were finishing up with the golems. Seeing Nagato being tossed, they'd both be gifted with just enough energy by Kurama. Kurama would see Nagato and would remember Hagoromo, and for the sake of him and the sake of the world, he would gift Naruto and Karin with the chakra they required. They would take on a chakra cloak of their own. They would rush off to fight Toneri as well, smashing him into the ground. Toneri would pull out of the ground and change his focus to them, striking out as they attacked him. He easily matched the two of them, as not only was he physically stronger, but he possessed a higher form of taijutsu. "Nagato!" Konan and Yahiko cried. "You have to get up!" Nagato slowly began to rise to his feet. "Guys, I'm sorry. I don't know how to defeat him." "Don't give up," a voice said. Suddenly, Nagato was in a dark space. Where was he? He looked up, and there hovered the Sage of Six Paths. "Don't give up, my descendant. You awakened the Rinnegan for a reason, and that reason is to bring peace to both Earth and to Toneri." "But how do I do that?" he asked. Suddenly, another voice chimed in. "You must teach him what was truly my will all along." "And what was your will?" Nagato asked Hamada. Hamada smiled. "My will was to safeguard the Earth and ensure peace was upon it. Peace for all people. It was our desire to protect the Earth from the threat of the Ten Tails, but it seems that Toneri has forgotten that. The connection to the Tensaigan is what's allowing Toneri to move the moon. I will grant you a bit of my chakra. Seek out the vessel and destroy it. Doing so will stop the moon from drawing closer. When you do so, find my Tensaigan and bring them to Toneri. I will tell him personally of my will." Suddenly, Nagato awakened. He felt a new power rush through him. He began to rise into the air as the Truth Seeker orbs formed around him. He then flew deeper into the moon. He followed his heart, and it led him to a temple. There he entered and found the Tensaigan vessel floating. Looking at it, he found it beautiful, a living relic of Hamada. It was sad that it must be destroyed, but this was for the best. Nagato would smash the vessel with all of his might, freeing generation upon generation of Byakugan. But as they floated there, Nagato noticed that floating in the center of them all was a glowing pair of orbs. Reaching out, he lifted them up. Looking at them, he knew they must be Hamada's. Back on the surface, Toneri felt the sudden stop of the moon's trajectory as it began to once more even out. He then knew what must have happened. "What have you done?" "Fulfilled Hamada's will," Nagato said as he rose to the surface. "I have something to show you." He reached out with his hands and offered Toneri Hamada's Tensaigan. "Learn to see the world the way that Hamada did," he said. Toneri took the Tensaigan and for a moment went silent as his consciousness was taken elsewhere. When he returned, he fell to his knees. I thought I was doing Hamada's will." Nagato knelt down. "Toneri, I want you to know something. I know we are the most recent sages of Six Paths, but we are not Hagoromo or Hamada. We're Nagato and Toneri, and we must act according to what we believe is right, not what our ancestors might have believed. We must choose to do what's right. And what do you think is right?" Toneri then looked out toward the earth. I want to protect that." Nagato hugged Toneri. "Then protect it. I will do the same. That's what we were destined to do." From there, the battle ended, and Toneri came to admit that he was wrong in destroying the Earth. As the moon settled back into place, the world sighed a sigh of relief. Naruto, Nagato, and Karin would return to their home in Konoha, where they would spend the night looking up at the moon, its normal size having returned. Nagato looked up at the moon solemnly and spoke. "I wonder if there's a world out there where I tried to do the same thing as Toneri, where I tried to destroy the Earth instead of protecting it." Naruto and Karin offered him a hug. "If there is, I'm sure your kind heart stopped it before you did it. You're a kind person, Nagato. Never forget that." Not long after, school began again. Naruto, Karin, and Nagato would all return to a hero's welcome. They ended up becoming the popular kids, which honestly got old quickly. Karin couldn't wait for the fad that was admiration by the students to end, which it eventually did. But as she sat there with her brother and cousin, she couldn't help but think that maybe they'd been placed there for a reason. Their mothers had been pulled apart by fate. Naruto, Karin, and Nagato had all suffered in their own ways. But despite everything, it had all worked out for the best. As they continued school together, Karin began to look at Naruto and Nagato and crave the next big step in their lives, their careers as shinobi, a day that couldn't come soon enough. And that's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Despite its ending though, I feel that it's safe to leave it open for future installments should you all like it enough. If so, be sure to like, comment, and share to tell us that you liked it. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified should we ever decide to make a sequel series. And while you're at it, check out these other videos as well. I bet you'll enjoy them. Anyway, until next time, peace out.